Okay, so the relationship with New Japan and AEW, I know that that was a whole thing, kind of going back and forth, figuring out what this whole forbidden door is. Obviously, you would have been a pretty heavy hand in what those conversations were like. What was that experience? And also just bringing you into to now work with best friends.
Well, the relationship between New Japan and AEW was kind of started off a little rocky. Obviously, like the elite being a part of New Japan, and then obviously this new company starting, and like what that was going to look like was kind of strange because there obviously were like especially Kenny was a contracted wrestler, and here he was saying like he was leaving to start a new company, so it was like it didn't start off the best, and
Hmm.
definitely the president at the time was was kind of opposed of working with AEW in the beginning. So definitely like people like Jericho, Moxley, and
Hmm.
Omega were kind of the ones to really get this whole kind of Forbidden Door idea started, and
Yeah.
getting the companies to work together. And then finally, I think with the pandemic, then all everything was closed off. There was only certain wrestlers that could go back and forth between Japan and America, which started which basically made the opportunity for the Kenta and Moxley angle to happen on the New
Right.
Japan side, which also Moxley versus Omega that was happening in AEW. And then Omega reached out and was like, I got this crazy idea to bring Kenta to AEW. What do you think? Do you think New Japan will go for it? And I said, well, I think now is a great time to
It
try
was a
it.
big moment. It
It was
was
a
cool
really
as
cool
all
moment.
hell. It was a really
It was
cool moment.
really awesome, and worked out. I feel like it worked out when Kenta showed up on Dynamite. Nobody was expecting that, and
Yeah.
and this was still taping in Jacksonville,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
front of just a few hundred fans or whatever it
Yeah.
was. And but it was just a really really amazing moment, and that was kind of like what definitely started to get things going. I met with Tony, and Tony was really really cool, and he how excited he was about working with New Japan, how much he wanted to work with New Japan, how much of a fan he was of New Japan before AEW. So
Yeah.
it just kind of worked itself out, and then there was starting to gain a little trust on both sides, I think. What then we finally came up with the idea of like, I think I texted with Tony like, what if we just did like a super show, of some sort, where
Hmm.
I said the matches could be mixed. They could be, New Japan matches, AEW matches, whatever it is. Let's just put the idea out there. I would love to see if we can make something work. And then Tony was immediately like, I have like 8 matches I'm ready to do. Like he had so many ideas right off the bat. I was like, oh, this is great. This is great. I was like, yeah, this is awesome. And then I'm thinking like, I hope New Japan says yes. So
Yeah,
then I went,
right?
I went back to New Japan. I told them about it, and all of a sudden it became a reality. Like things started happening behind the scenes where we're talking about, well, how would it work, who handles the production, da 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 da. So going back and forth. So I just was going back and forth between Chris Harrington and the New Japan office, between Tony and the New Japan office, and just going back and forth. And then we were able to put this show together, and it was a crazy experience because New
Yeah.
Japan is such a live event company. AEW is obviously like a television company, so
Yeah.
two very different worlds. So like there we had some some scheduling conflicts, and then obviously like COVID, a lot people
Yeah.
COVID. Then we had injuries on top of that. So like definitely the original plan changed a bunch, but it was cool that both companies were willing to make it work, and figure out how to make this thing work. And it was a huge success. I
Oh my
mean,
God,
one
it
of the
was
biggest pay per
amazing.
views of the year. So
Yeah, it was awesome. Okay, so for you to join Best Friends, there's obviously some deep history there with a few of
yes,
those fellows. But for
right.
you to be on, back into the wrestling scene of things with AEW.
Yeah, that was kind of the unexpected part. I think that after like the first time I showed up at like with Kenta at when he showed up on Dynamite,
Hmm.
uh Tony was like, dude, I love Roppongi Vice. It's one of my favorite songs of all time. He's like, sometimes I play it after the shows, and then so I had to confirm with Trent, like, does Tony really like Roppongi Vice? Does he really play it after the shows? He's like, yeah, dude, he knows all the words. I was like, oh, that's cool. So then he was like,
That's so funny.
yeah, it was really cool. So then he's like, so he mentioned, he's like, I would love for you to come back to AEW sometime. And Trent was hurt at the time, but I would love for eventually we can do like a Roppongi Vice reunion in AEW. And that was kind of the stepping stones of working with best friends, and
Yeah.
then obviously working with OC, working with Chuck,
Yep.
and Chris. So it was, yeah, just like really really cool, and just kind of got thrown into it. So then like now I'm the guy who can, I'll obviously become like a New Japan representative in AEW all the time, but also be a part of like an existing stable
Yeah.
angle at any point. Whenever they need an extra person, they can just throw me in there and plug me in,
You get to be that like Swiss Army knife player. What do you need?
Yes,
What do you
exactly.
need? Rocky's got the goods. Your time working with Gallows and Anderson. Let's talk about those fellows for a minute.
Do we need to? I feel like
I mean, I don't know. I think when you start talking about Gallows and Anderson, it's like, well, what stories can we tell? What do you
exactly.
say? Okay, so we don't have to get into details about too many things. But with Gallows and Anderson going back to WWE, Anderson having a title at New Japan, kind of keeping that door open. What is the deal? What's going
It's,
on?
it's been a very stressful situation for me.
Yeah, I bet. I
I
bet.
bet. So, yeah, obviously, when the guys started saying, talking about the, WWE had reached out to them, I, of course, started to get nervous because I knew that we had a bunch of dates, set and everything. And obviously, like you said, Anderson was the never open champion. So, I got worried and I said, you guys don't screw me over, please. Like I
Yeah.
was part of the
Yeah.
reason that you guys came back, and helped obviously they left on, they left on good terms and everything,
Hmm.
but just to bring them back, was definitely a part of that. So, so we started talking we started talking about that, but then, finally he was like, okay, well, we're going to sign, and, somebody's going to have to talk to WWE. So of course that means
Hence
me
you.
having to talk to WWE. And but I got on the line, and obviously there was some confusion on the dates that they were going to actually do. And there was that November 5th show that Anderson had already been announced for New Japan, but then
Mhm.
it was also the same time that the Saudi Arabia show was going on.
Uh,
So then there was going to be a conflict right there. So that's kind of
mm,
how it started. It started off real rocky, obviously, but they went and did Saudi. We figured it out. We got a new date, and then we just decided to turn it into a big angle, because I
yeah.
thought that was probably the best way to deal with it. Kind of some realism to it, and also there's hoping that everything was going to work out, but not really sure. So
Yeah.
finally he went and did this last show a couple days ago, and successfully defended the title. So
Mhm.
now he's on, he'll be at the Tokyo Dome to face Tama Tonga, which is really exciting. So
Yeah, huge.
dude, this Tokyo Dome is going to be insane. We have WWE wrestler and Carl Anderson. We have Kenny Omega, who's an AEW wrestler.
Mhm.
We've got Stardom wrestlers on the show. We've got New
Is there
Japan
anybody else that's
wrestlers.
showing up for that show that we're not sure about yet, or?
I've heard a lot of rumors, but I don't really. I cannot confirm nor deny at this
Okay.
moment. But
Okay. Interesting. Interesting.
fingers
Okay.
crossed that you never know what could happen.
You never know.
Surprises definitely will be some surprises at the Tokyo Dome.
What are the
Um,
odds that maybe one AJ Styles, the phenomenal one, were to make his way out to the ring with Carl Anderson?
anything is
Silence.
possible, Renee.